the mysterious walking stool of Sri Lanka. Going back a few years ago, there were images and stories going around that objects in Sri Lanka were moving on their own. One of these was a stool. The story goes that after rituals are performed, the stool was able to move on its own. These magical rituals are usually performed by a witch doctor, which use a variety of natural materials to summon some kind of paranormal entity. Over the years, many stories have come from this region. Another location shrouded in mystery is that of the stoneways to Sri Lanka. Many Indians grow up hearing the story of the Ramayana, which is an ancient Hindu poem that spoke of a magical bridge being constructed from large floating stones that stretched from the southern parts of India all the way to the northern part of Sri Lanka, that was placed by the Hindu god Rama. What is absolutely mysterious about this claim is that no evidence of stones had been found until new state-of-the-art NASA satellites looked towards the region of northern Sri Lanka to notice large stones resting on the sandbar underwater that stretched 30 miles from Sri Lanka to the southern part of India, connecting the massive land masses. Researchers immediately began carbon dating the stones in an effort to better understand the time frame of the formation stones and whether or not they had formed naturally. This theory was almost immediately proven to be false, as evidence of carbon dating showed that the stones had been placed in that location artificially, given the fact that the large stones on top of the sandbar were of an older material than the sand beneath it, leading research scientists to believe that the rocks were carved from different areas and moved to that location by ancient people. The ability for the ancestors of the region to have constructed a massive 30-mile megalithic structure of stones weighing thousands of tons appears to lead many to believe that the ancients had advanced technologies that we could not fathom today. Even more interestingly are all the ancient Hindu accounts of the bridge and the gods forming these magical pathways via flying machines they would ride on. 486958 Arakov. On the 12th of November 2019, researchers officially named the distant object 2014 MU69 as Arakov. The new name means sky in Powhatan, a language spoken by the Powhatan people of Tidewater, Virginia. Arakov is the most distant object ever explored by a spacecraft. It was discovered on the 26th of June 2014 by the Hubble Space Telescope. Then, on the 1st of January 2019, the New Horizons space probe performed a successful flyby close to this distant object. Previously, Arakov was nicknamed Ultima Thule. The object is floating amongst the different asteroids, comets, and icy rocks in the Kuiper Belt, which is the region of the solar system beyond the 8 major planets. The inner edge of the Kuiper Belt is estimated to be about 30 astronomical units from the Sun, and its outer edge is estimated to be at a distance of 50 astronomical units from the Sun. 1 astronomical unit is equal to the distance between the Earth and the Sun, which is approximately 150 million kilometers. Arakov is classified as a cold classical Kuiper Belt object. During the flyby, the New Horizons space probe flew past Arakov at a distance of only 2,000 miles. Earlier, the space probe performed a flyby over Pluto as well. However, its distance from Pluto was around 5,800 miles. Therefore, the space probe was able to provide more detailed photographs of Arakov as compared to Pluto. NASA released the photographs of Arakov after the successful flyby in January 2019. The photos revealed the distant object having a snowman-like shape. It is composed of 2 lobes that have roughly spherical shapes. These lobes are tightly joined at the neck, and according to researchers, the surface at this part shines much more brightly as compared to other parts of the object. Arakov is about 21 miles in length. Hiroo Anoda. Hiroo Anoda was a Japanese man who lived from the 19th of March 1922 to the 16th of January 2014. He fought in the Second World War as Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence. The Imperial Japanese Army functioned as the official ground armed forces of the Japanese Empire. It was headed by the Japanese Army General Staff Office and the Ministry of the Army, who were both subordinates of the Japanese Emperor. Hiroo Anoda was not only notable for being a part of the Imperial Japanese Army, but rather for his courageous and brave act in August 1945, which was towards the end of the war. Subsequently, after the war ended, he spent another 29 years hiding in the Philippines. This was not an act of cowardice, but rather an act of commitment and patriotism to his call to duty. This he continued until he was relieved of his duty by an order of the then Emperor of Japan, Showa, in 1974, alongside a presidential pardon. Up until he was relieved of duty from the Imperial Japanese Army Intelligence, he served as the second lieutenant, and just like his rank, he was also the second to last person to surrender, with the last being Teruo Nakamura. Aside the professional occupation of being a military man, Hiroo Anoda was also a cattle farmer, a profession inherited from the Kamikawa village, Laxo district, Wakayama, Japan, before he got enlisted to the Imperial Japanese Army Infantry at the age of 18. Anoda was an intelligence officer alongside some other officials who were instructed to do all within their might to obscure all attacks of the enemy. Not too long after, his co-intelligence officers had either surrendered or passed away. This facilitated his promotion to lieutenant, of which he then ordered his men to take to hiding. He documented in detail his life as a fighter in the war in an autobiography titled No Surrender, My 30-Year War. This autobiography was written shortly after his return from the war. Though not documented in his autobiography, accounts of locals have it that he took the life of persons in the town where he went into hiding. Upon his return, Anoda was quite displeased and bothered with the decline in the traditional values of Japan. In 1975, he finally left Japan for Brazil, following closely the example of his elder brother to rear cattle. Subsequently, he got married in 1976 and assumed a leadership role in the Japanese community in Terenos, Brazil, which was known as the Jamek colony. He also held various educational and enlightening camps for different young persons across Japan. On the 6th of December 2004, the Brazilian Air Force awarded him the meritorious Medal of Santos Dumont. Also, on the 21st of February 2010, the Legislative Assembly of Mato Grosso do Sul honoured him with the title of Cidadão, which means a citizen. Sadly, on the 16th of January 2014, he passed away as a result of heart failure coming from pneumonia complications. The Lost Library of Ivan the Terrible. Known as the Golden Library or the Lost Library of the Moscow Tsars, this particular collection of texts dates back to 16th century Russia. Believed to have been created by Ivan the Terrible, the once esteemed collection of priceless works is now little more than a mysterious treasure hunt. Many believe the library houses very rare Greek, Latin, and Egyptian works, as well as some 2nd century Chinese works. The marriage of Ivan the Terrible to Princess Sophia Paleologue of the Byzantine is said to have brought the remnants of the libraries of Constantinople into the collection. The first recorded reference to the library was made in 1518, in a biography of Greek scholar Mikhail Tripolis, or Maximus the Greek. A meeting between Tripolis and Prince Vasily III is mentioned. Prince Vasily, son of Ivan the Great, knew Tripolis had already worked translating texts into Russian. Tripolis described countless multitudes of Greek books, noting that he had not even seen as many Greek books in Greece. It is widely believed that Ivan the Terrible kept this hoard of books beneath the Moscow Kremlin. The Kremlin is the fortified complex in Moscow's city centre, housing 5 palaces, 4 cathedrals, and the Grand Kremlin Palace, which once housed the Tsars and now serves as the home of the President of the Russian Federation. During this time, fires commonly spread throughout the city. Perhaps it was the only safe place to house such works safely. The books did not rot beneath the Kremlin, however. While establishing a church in Russia in the late 16th century, German minister Johannes Vettermann was summoned to the Kremlin by Ivan the Terrible. Vettermann, among others, were tasked with translating some works. Although Vettermann declined the job, it goes to show that Ivan remained dedicated to the knowledge held within his library. In the early 19th century, Professor Christopher van Dabalov from Estonia believed he discovered a list of the texts of the Tsar's collection in archives located in Pärnu. Although he claimed he could not find the document after his first visit, notes he had taken indicate the library consisted of 800 manuscripts, including those from a Byzantine emperor. This list also mentioned 142 volumes of the history of Rome, of which historians only knew of 35, a full version of the otherwise incomplete Cicero's De Republica, and an unknown Virgil poem. Some doubt the credibility, however, as von Dabilov did not share the list with anyone. In the 1890s, Professor Thramer of the University of Strasbourg spent time scouring Moscow's city libraries in hopes of finding the lost texts of Ivan the Terrible. He did locate a book of Homer's hymns that he believed originated in the Library of Constantinople, leaving him to believe it had made its way to Russia through Princess Sophia. Through all of his hunting, however, Thramer too concluded that the collection must be hidden beneath the Kremlin. Excavations beneath the Kremlin have turned up nothing but some weapons and empty hallways. There have been no discoveries of chests filled with books, as some have claimed. As with any good treasure hunt, the library is now ripe with myths. Some believe Ivan the Terrible was translating books of dark magic. Another such story claims the library has been cursed, causing blindness to whoever lays eyes on it. In the 1990s, the search for the library extended past the Kremlin into the surrounding areas under the influence of Ivan the Terrible, though no great discovery has yet been found. Destroyed by fire, cursed, or perhaps not even existing in the first place, what do you think happened to the library of Ivan the Terrible? The graves of slaves. For some unknown reason, the Egyptian government and the expert Egyptologists claim that there were never Semitic-speaking people or Hebrews of which that were enslaved in Egypt all throughout its history at any point in time. Quite obviously, these findings and claims directly contradict the stories of the Torah and the Christian Bible, of which many claim to be an effort made by the Egyptian government given their tensions with the Israeli government and against Christian organizations. Interestingly enough, the truth is that there is overwhelming evidence that Semitic-speaking people inhabited Egypt, including a direct reference to the Torah that specified a second pharaoh of whom was Hebrew and possibly the existence of Joseph in the time before Moses. In fact, by the late Middle Kingdom era, of which was roughly 3,700 years ago, the Semitic-speaking people had achieved the highest forms of power in Egypt, in the form of the second pharaoh ruling the entire lower kingdom of Egypt, along with more than 27 scarabs found in Egypt, Canaan, and Nubia, confirming these changes in power. It also appears that evidence of these Semitic-speaking people were found in the discovery of a pit of Hebrews dated around the end of this reign, of whom were believed to have possibly been thrown into a mass grave similar to that commonly seen in the treatment of slaves. The Egyptian record then goes on to specify that Semitic-speaking people were banished when a strange and mysterious group known as the Hyksos came into power, showing that there is more than enough artifacts and evidence of the reign of a second pharaoh, the banishment of the Hebrew people, and pits of mass graves that held Hebrew slaves. Although Egyptologists have not only completely refused to speak on the matter and find the evidence to be nothing more than an out-of-context belief that doesn't fit with their own, it is obvious that they have no way to explain the authenticity of these accounts and the biblical one. The Lost Dutchmans Gold Mine. The Superstition Mountains. The name just makes you want to go and explore it even before you know what's said to be hidden in the hills. Located east of Phoenix, Arizona, there are tales of a gold mine, the Lost Dutchmans Gold Mine. People have been scouring the mountains looking for this treasure since at least 1892. At one point, it is said that over 8,000 people were looking for the mine annually. So, who was the Lost Dutchman? Well, as most stories, time and tale have twisted the history into a woven mix of fact and fiction. In fact, in 1977, there had been 62 versions of the story already in circulation. Most of them go something like this. German immigrant Jacob Volz settled in Arizona during the gold rush. Around that same time, there was a wealthy Mexican family in the same area, known as the Peraltas. The Peraltas were cattle ranchers who had also discovered gold along the Superstition Mountains. While returning gold to Mexico, the Peraltas were ambushed and most of them were killed by Apaches. Some stories say the Apaches took the gold back and hid it, later to be discovered by Volts. Others say Volts lent a helping hand to one of the remaining Peraltas who rewarded him by telling him where to find the gold. Either way you slice it, the gold was real. Upon his death in 1891, bars of gold were found beneath Volts' bed. In 1949, Peralta stones were found in the mountains, lending credibility to the tales. While hiking in the superstitions, a hiker tripped over an exposed corner of the stone. This led him to dig up 4 different smooth, carved stones. There were many markings. One stone read, "I pasture north of the river." Others depicted figures such as a priest with a cross. Mentions of dangerous canyon walks and 18 marked places to get to the heart are on others. On 2 of the stones, maps are leading to a heart. The temperature at night drops rapidly, often causing hikers to have hypothermia. Others believe there isn't a mine to be found at all, instead a great cache of stolen goods and gold hid away by Volts himself. Whether it is a hidden cache or a pure gold vein, it has kept people searching. Although a law was passed in 1984 prohibiting the mining and digging in the area, treasure hunters still flock to the area, hoping for a bit of that gold rush excitement. Griphonden. During the 1970s, a local diving club discovered the wreck of an unusual ancient Danish ship in the Baltic Sea just north of the island of Store Ekon. The wreck was found lying at a depth of 10 meters. The divers were not aware that what they had discovered was actually a highly significant archaeological find. Therefore, they did not tell the archaeologists about the discovery until the year 2000. Once archaeologists found out about the wreck, they investigated the wreck, and in 2013, by using advanced techniques like dendrochronological sampling, they identified the ship as Griphonden. The archaeologists found that the ship was made from the oak trees that felled during the winters of 1482 and 1483. Griphonden, which is also known as Gribshund, Grif, and sometimes Grifone, was a Danish warship used by John, the King of Denmark, from 1481 to 1513. It is believed that the ship sank in 1485 as a result of a fire. This ship has a very unique design, especially made for psychological warfare. The ship features a beak of an eagle, giant teeth, and a screaming man that sticks out of the mouth. Archaeologists have also found the traces of paint used to colour the figurehead. Researchers are now trying to figure out the exact colour with which the figurehead of the ship was painted. Griphonden is considered to be one of the best preserved shipwrecks from the medieval period. Several parts of the wreckage, including the figurehead, have been brought to Copenhagen for further research. It is currently in the custodianship of the Danish National Museum. Sightings of the Zimbabwe merfolk. Unlike the cute, animated portrayals of the mythical creature, the mermaids of Zimbabwe have been a recurring problem for those living nearby large waterways in the country, as the humanoid creatures have reportedly been at the centre of a variety of random attacks, terrifying vandalism, and delays in construction efforts. Back in 2012, while working on the Gokwe and Osborne dams, the Zimbabwe construction company claimed that nearly every employee had left the construction site in fear for their lives after having been attacked by a strange humanoid river monster known as the Mamba Muntu. It was believed that the Mambu Muntu used the rivers as natural outlets to the ocean, and that they had become terribly angered by the construction efforts. Debates were made on whether or not construction should continue before a full report on the environmental impact was made. However, under pressure of contracts and health standards, construction continued regardless. This forced the local council to hire entirely new workers from out of the country to work on the dam, as the locals refused to continue working on the construction of the project due to their superstitions. Oddly enough, after several weeks, even the foreign workers resigned after claiming to have been attacked by humanoid sea creatures and regarded the entire river as being cursed. In an effort to appease these strange creatures, the council was forced to perform cleansing rituals and make offerings to the creatures before construction began again with no further issues. Although most do not make the connection, Zambia, the closest country to Zimbabwe, built the Kariba Dam in the same waterways within their borders. The project was determined to be a necessity in the region, as the water from the river would not only be able to power all of the electrical requirements for that region, But it would also prove to be a major work program that would allow a number of locals to generate income while working on the projects to be used to help spur the local economy of the region. Unfortunately, many of the religious figures already suffering under the oppressive hand of the government felt that the construction of the dam was a violation of the principles of their god known as Nyaminyami. Nyaminyami was, more specifically, the god of the river Zambezi and was believed to reside within the river. Religious figures argued that if the dam was built, then Nyaminyami would curse them for messing with the natural ecosystem and bring on a terrible tragedy, urging the locals to defy the government and refuse construction. Despite this sentiment from the religious leaders, many of the locals would still go on to work on the construction of the dam, assisting in the government's tactic to force the native Batonga people to move from their homes and live elsewhere. Almost as if directly predicted by the religious leaders, shortly after the Batonga people were moved, a devastating flood tore through the region, and due to the half-construction of the dam blocking the only direction for water to flow, it led to the entire dam becoming destroyed, killing every single worker that was working on the construction of the project. Oddly enough, however, not a single body has been recovered. Given the fact that the majority of those who died were locals, this led to many of the relatives begging the religious leaders to help lift the curse and allow the dam to be constructed without any future problems. Religious leaders then gave instructions to the people for the only way that the curse would be lifted. They must sacrifice a calf and offer it to the river. For some inexplicable reason, after the ceremony was completed, the bodies of the workers appeared where the calf was placed in the river, allowing the souls to finally be put to rest. Agnes Sampson. In the spring of 1590, King James VI of Scotland had just returned from Copenhagen with his bride, Anne of Denmark. Denmark at the time was obsessed by the topic of witchcraft, and during his visit, James had been witness to multiple witch hunts and 2 executions of accused witches at Kronborg. James was so taken by the rumours of this sorcery that he immediately attributed the rough seas on his return voyage from Denmark to Scotland as the work of Scottish witches, who had raised storms to endanger him and his wife's life. As soon as he set foot on Scottish lands, he decided to set up trials and inquisitions to outsource Scottish witches. Scotland was swept up in a mass hysteria which saw hundreds of women accused. Agnes Sampson was one of the unfortunate Scottish women accused of witchcraft. A successful midwife and considered to have healing powers, it was hardly surprising she would be accused. In Scotland, there was a deep-running skepticism of abortionists and healers by the largely dominated male medical profession. Sampson was accused of gathering with the devil and other witches on Halloween night of 1590 to conjure storms to attempt to sink the king's ship. Though Sampson vehemently denied any association with witchcraft, she was tortured and brought before King James himself. Sampson's torture included being stripped naked and shaved to try and spot a devil's mark, being thrown in a prison cell and constantly kept awake, and being forced to wear a witch's bridle. A painful and humiliating apparatus that involved an iron muzzle put around your head with several spikes going into your face. Remarkably, no one was able to extract a confession from Sampson. Her guards became increasingly frustrated and decided to increase Sampson's torture. They placed a tourniquet rope around her neck and began to strangle her. It was only then that Sampson confessed to having contact with the devil, who she said appeared to her as a black man, a dog and a hayrick, and using witchcraft to attempt to kill King James and his bride. Following her confession, Sampson was taken to a scaffold on Castle Hill where she was burnt at the stake. It is said that to this day, Sampson's ghost roams Holyrood Palace. She appears naked and shaved and moves in a slow and agonizing way, the repercussions of the torture she was forced to endure. Penrith Hoard. In 1785, a small boy found a few silver brooches at the New Bigging Moor near Penrith in England. Later, in 1830, a few other smaller thistle brooches were found in the same area. 150 years later, in 1989, a detailed archaeological investigation at the same spot resulted in discovery of a number of other silver items. Archaeologists concluded that all these items were a part of a dispersed hoard. Usually such hoards are dispersed as a result of routine farming work. For example, some items of a single hoard can be moved to a different location as a result of ploughing. The Penrith Hoard includes 5 Viking brooches, jewellery, coins, ingots and hack silver. The large thistle brooch discovered in 1785 was passed to the Laverian Museum, which was a private museum in London. It was eventually brought to the British Museum. A few items of the hoard that were discovered in 1785 and 1830 were lost. However, most of the items of this dispersed hoard have been recovered and are kept at the British Museum in London. Some historians believe that the hoard could be connected to the events of 927 AD, when the kings of Scotland and Strathclyde came to Penrith to honour Athelstan. Gothrith, the king of Dublin, was also in the area along with his army. It's believed that a number of skirmishes happened between Athelstan and Gothrith, resulting in Athelstan's eventual victory. Historians believe that the Penrith Hoard may have been deposited at some point during these skirmishes.